The secret within, in the heart of the dense Western Ghats, hidden from the world, lay Rudra Villa, an ancient mansion with a dark reputation. The locals believed it was cursed, a place where the restless spirits of the past still roam, unable to find peace. Few dared to go near it, and fewer still returned with their sanity intact. Karan, a young photographer looking for inspiration, was drawn to the village of Haripur, where Rudra Villa stood like a ghost from another time. The eerie silence that surrounded the mansion fascinated him, and despite the villagers' warnings, he couldn't resist exploring the mysterious villa. His curiosity soon led him to the decaying gates of the mansion, where the air was thick with an unsettling presence. Inside, the mansion was a relic of the past. Dusty chandeliers, rotting wooden floors, and walls lined with portraits of people long forgotten. Karan could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, as though the house itself were alive, watching his every move. As he ventured deeper into the mansion, Karan found an old journal hidden in a drawer. It belonged to Captain Richard Armstrong, a British officer who had built the mansion for his wife, Maya, during the colonial era. The journal detailed a tragic love story, a forbidden romance between Armstrong and Maya, an Indian woman. Their love was filled with passion, but it ended in mystery. One day, Maya simply vanished, leaving no trace behind, and Armstrong spiraled into madness. But the journal hinted at something more sinister. There was mention of a hidden room within the mansion, a place where Armstrong believed the truth of Maya's disappearance was buried. As Karan read the cryptic entries, strange things began happening around him. He heard faint whispers echoing through the empty halls, and he felt a cold presence hovering just behind him. The deeper he delved into the journal, the more he felt that something was watching him, something that didn't want him to uncover the secrets of Rudra Villa. Determined to find the hidden room, Karan began to search the mansion, following the clues in the journal. Every step he took was accompanied by eerie occurrences, doors creaking open on their own, shadows flickering in the corner of his vision, and the constant sensation that he was not alone. The whispers grew louder, and sometimes, he could swear they were calling his name. One night, Karan's search led him to a bricked-up wall in one of the mansion's lower chambers. Using a crowbar he found in the cellar, he chipped away at the bricks, revealing a hidden door. Behind it was a small, forgotten room. In the center of the room was a large, cracked mirror, its surface covered in a thick layer of dust. As Karan wiped away the dust, he felt a wave of cold air rush past him. The mirror, though old and broken, seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. When Karan looked into it, he didn't just see his reflection, he saw something far more terrifying. In the mirror, Karan saw Maya, her face twisted in pain and anguish. She was reaching out to him, her eyes pleading for help. But behind her stood Captain Armstrong, his face contorted with rage and betrayal. Karan watched in horror as Armstrong struck Maya, and she fell to the ground, disappearing into the darkness. Terrified, Karan backed away from the mirror, but the visions wouldn't stop. He saw more scenes from the past, Maya crying out for someone named Rudra, a local revolutionary with whom she had been secretly involved. Armstrong had discovered their affair, and in a fit of jealousy, he had killed her. But the body was never found because Armstrong had used an ancient ritual to trap Maya's soul within the mirror, cursing her to an eternity of suffering. Karan realized with dread that the mirror was the key to everything. It wasn't just a reflection of the past, it was a prison for Maya's tormented spirit. And now, the curse of Rudra Villa had set its sights on him. In a desperate attempt to free Maya, Karan tried to shatter the mirror, but it was no ordinary glass. The more he struck it, the louder the whispers grew, and the shadows around him began to move, taking shape. Figures from the past emerged, Maya, Armstrong, and Rudra, all locked in their eternal struggle. The mansion itself seemed to pulse with life, as though it were feeding off the pain and suffering that had occurred within its walls. Just as Karan was about to give up, the journal fell open to the final page, a cryptic drawing of the mirror surrounded by strange symbols. It was a ritual, one that Armstrong had used to trap Maya, but Karan realized that it could be reversed. With trembling hands, he gathered the materials he needed and began the ritual, reciting the ancient words scrawled in the journal. As he spoke, the room around him began to shake, and the mirror's surface rippled like water. Maya's face appeared once more, her eyes filled with hope. But before Karan could finish the ritual, Armstrong's ghost materialized in front of him, his face twisted with fury. He lunged at Karan, trying to stop him from freeing Maya. In a final act of defiance, Karan completed the ritual, and with a blinding flash of light, the mirror shattered. Maya's spirit was freed, and for the first time in over a century, the mansion was silent. Karan staggered out of Rudra Villa, the weight of the curse finally lifted. But as he looked back at the crumbling mansion, he couldn't shake the feeling that some secrets were better left buried. Though Maya's spirit was free, the darkness that had consumed Rudra Villa still lingered, waiting for the next soul brave, or foolish, enough to uncover its deadly secrets. As Karan left Rudra Villa, the night seemed darker than usual, the air colder. The village of Haripur appeared unchanged, but Karan felt the weight of something heavy, unseen yet present. Even though the curse was supposedly broken, the events of the night continued to haunt him. He returned to his cottage, but sleep eluded him. His mind replayed the images of Maya's fleeting eyes, Armstrong's twisted face, and the shattered mirror. Days passed, but the whispers never truly stopped. At first, Karan thought they were echoes of his imagination, lingering after such a traumatic experience. But the whispers grew louder, more distinct. Maya's voice, soft and sorrowful, would reach him in the dead of night, calling his name. Then, one evening, Karan received an unexpected visitor, Simran, the archaeologist who had been researching the ruins near Rudra Villa. She had heard about his time in the mansion and came to check on him, sensing that something wasn't right. "You freed her, didn't you?" Simran asked, her voice low, as though afraid someone might overhear. "I think so," Karan replied, uncertainty creeping into his words. "But I can still feel her. I hear her, even now." Simran's expression darkened. "There's something you don't know about the curse." It wasn't just about Maya or Armstrong. It was about the land, the very ground that Villa was built on. That's why Maya's spirit wasn't the only one trapped there. Karan felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" Simran explained that the mansion's history went far deeper than what the villagers had told him. Long before Armstrong built Rudra Villa, the land was sacred, home to an ancient tribe that practiced dark rituals. The tribe believed the land held power to trap souls, to control the dead. When Armstrong unknowingly performed the ritual on Maya, he had tapped into that ancient force, unleashing something far more dangerous than he had ever realized. The mirror wasn't just a prison for Maya, Simran continued. It was a gateway. When you broke it, you didn't just free her. You opened a door to something older, something darker. Karan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "So, you're saying, I've made things worse?" Simran nodded grimly. "We need to go back. There's something still inside the mansion, something that won't rest until it consumes everything." Despite the terror Karan had experienced, a strange compulsion pulled him back toward Rudra Villa. Perhaps it was unfinished business, or perhaps the ancient power that now lingered in the land was drawing him back. Either way, he agreed to return with Simran, hoping to end whatever evil remained. As they approached the mansion, the air grew thick and oppressive. The once crumbling villa seemed almost alive, its broken windows watching them with a malevolent gaze. The door, though heavy with decay, creaked open as if expecting them. Inside, the shadows moved unnaturally, swirling around them like living entities. The atmosphere was thick with dread, and the whispers had returned, this time louder, more aggressive. It wasn't just Maya's voice anymore. Dozens of voices called out, overlapping, filling the air with cries of torment. Simran pulled out a small journal, one she had found during her research. "There's another ritual," she said, her voice shaking. "A way to close the gateway, to seal whatever it is that Armstrong accidentally unleashed." Together, they made their way to the hidden room where the mirror once stood. The shards of glass still lay scattered on the floor, but their surface now shimmered with an unnatural light. Karan could feel the presence of something ancient and vengeful, lurking just beyond the veil of the shattered mirror. As Simran began reciting the incantation from her journal, the room around them seemed to come alive. The walls pulsed, the air vibrated, and a deep, guttural sound filled the mansion. Karan's heart raced as he realized they were no longer alone. From the shadows, figures began to emerge, twisted, distorted versions of the people who had died within the mansion over the years. Among them, Karan recognized Captain Armstrong and Maya, their faces contorted in eternal pain and rage. Armstrong's ghost lunged at Karan, his eyes filled with fury. "You have no right to be here," the spirit hissed, his voice like nails on a chalkboard. "This is my domain. She was mine." Karan barely dodged the attack, but Armstrong's rage was relentless. As Simran continued the ritual, the spirits grew more violent, their forms swirling around the room in a vortex of anger and despair. Maya, though freed, seemed torn between her love for Rudra and her bond to Armstrong, her ghostly form shifting between the two men who had shaped her fate. With a final shout, Simran completed the incantation. A blinding light erupted from the journal, illuminating the room and forcing the spirits back. The ground beneath them shook, and for a moment, it felt as though the entire mansion would collapse. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the chaos stopped. The spirits faded, the shadows retreated, and the oppressive weight lifted. The mansion, once alive with darkness, now stood silent, its ancient curse seemingly broken. Karan and Simran stumbled out of Rudra Villa, exhausted but relieved. The ancient power that had plagued the land for centuries had been sealed once more, and with it, the spirits of Maya, Armstrong, and the others could finally rest. But as they left the mansion behind, Karan couldn't shake the feeling that something still lingered. The curse may have been sealed, but the land itself would never be free of its dark history. The mansion would stand as a reminder, a monument to the secrets it held, and the souls it had claimed. And in the quiet of the night, if one listened closely, they could still hear the faintest whisper of voices, calling out from beyond the grave. Even after all seemed calm, Karan knew one truth: some secrets never die. Karan and Simran left Rudra Villa behind them, but its shadow loomed over their minds long after they returned to the village. Haripur was as quiet and serene as it had always been, but to them, it felt like the calm before a storm. The villagers, who had warned them before, now looked at them with fear and suspicion. They whispered among themselves, afraid that the curse of Rudra Villa had followed Karan and Simran back into the village. For a few days, Karan tried to return to normal life. He busied himself with his photography, taking pictures of the surrounding forests and the quiet life in Haripur. But the camera lens seemed to capture things that his eyes could not see. Shadows appeared in the corners of his photos, strange, faceless figures lurking in the background. At night, when Karan developed the photos in his darkroom, he could hear the faint whispers again. No matter how many times he looked at the images, they seemed to change, warping into strange, unsettling shapes that made his skin crawl. One evening, as Karan was sorting through his latest batch of photos, he found something that made his blood run cold. In one of the pictures, taken in the forest near Rudra Villa, there was a figure standing among the trees. It was a woman in a white dress, Maya. Her face was pale, her eyes dark and hollow. She was looking directly at the camera, as though she had been watching him the entire time. Karen's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the photo. How could this be? He had freed her spirit. She was supposed to be at peace. Yet here she was, staring back at him from the photo, as real as ever. He rushed to Simran's cottage, clutching the photograph in his hand. When she opened the door, her face paled at the sight of him. "I've been hearing them too," she said before he could even speak. The whispers, the voices. Something is still wrong. Karen handed her the photo. Simran's eyes widened as she recognized Maya in the image. "This can't be," she whispered. "We completed the ritual. We closed the gateway. Then why is she still here?" Karen demanded, his voice laced with frustration. "Why do I keep hearing her? Why can't I stop feeling like I'm being watched?" Simran sat down, staring at the photo in disbelief. "There's something we missed. Something we didn't understand about the curse. It's not just about the spirits. It's the land itself. There's a deeper force at work here, something older than Armstrong, older than Maya." Karen's heart sank. He had hoped that freeing Maya would end the nightmare, but now it seemed they were only scratching the surface of something far more terrifying. That night, Simran and Karen pored over every book and journal they could find. Simran had a vast collection of historical texts, many of which described the ancient tribes that once inhabited the Western Ghats. These tribes had worshipped dark gods and practiced rituals that bound the spirits of the dead to the land. Their beliefs were rooted in the idea that death was not the end, but merely a passage to a different realm. By trapping souls, they believed they could harness the power of the afterlife to control the living. One text, in particular, caught their attention. It described a ritual called the Binding of the Eternal, a ceremony used by the ancient tribes to imprison souls within physical objects, such as mirrors, stones, or even the land itself. The ritual was irreversible, unless a blood descendant of the one who performed the binding was involved in the breaking of the curse. "That's why it didn't work," Simran said, her voice trembling. "We didn't break the curse. We only scratched the surface. The true curse wasn't just on Maya or Armstrong. It's on the land, and it can only be broken by someone who shares blood with the tribe that first placed it." Karen stared at her in disbelief. "But those tribes have been gone for centuries. How could we possibly find a descendant?" Simran's eyes darkened as she looked out the window, the wind howling through the trees. "There's one place we haven't looked yet. The ruins." The next day, Karen and Simran made their way deep into the forest, toward the ancient ruins that Simran had been researching. The ruins were overgrown, hidden among the trees and vines, but their presence was unmistakable. The air around them felt heavy, charged with an ancient energy that seemed to pulse beneath the surface. As they explored the ruins, they found strange carvings on the stone walls, depictions of rituals, sacrifices, and symbols that neither of them could fully understand. But the deeper they ventured into the ruins, the more they felt the presence of something watching them, something that had been waiting for them. At the center of the ruins, they found an altar. It was old and weathered, but the symbols etched into its surface were still visible. In the middle of the altar was a stone tablet, inscribed with words in an ancient language. Simran knelt down, tracing her fingers over the symbols. "This is it," she said softly. "This is where it all began. The curse, the binding ritual, everything." As Karen stood by her side, a strange feeling washed over him. It was as though the land itself was speaking to him, whispering ancient secrets in a language he couldn't understand. The wind picked up, swirling around them, and the shadows in the ruins seemed to stretch and grow. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The altar glowed faintly, and the air was filled with a deep, guttural sound, as though the very earth was groaning. Karan and Simran stepped back as the stone tablet began to crack, splitting open before their eyes. From the crack in the stone, a figure emerged, an ancient spirit, its form twisted and contorted, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It was the spirit of the tribal elder who had first performed the binding ritual centuries ago, and it had been waiting for this moment, waiting for someone to awaken it. "You have come," the spirit hissed, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "You have awakened the curse. And now, you must pay the price." Karan and Simran stood frozen in fear as the spirit loomed over them, its presence suffocating. They realized, too late, that the curse was far more powerful than they had ever imagined. It wasn't just about freeing trapped souls, it was about unleashing something far darker, something that had been bound to the land for centuries. The spirit reached out toward Karan, its bony fingers brushing against his chest. He felt a surge of pain, as though his very soul was being pulled from his body. He fell to his knees, gasping for breath, as the spirit's laughter echoed through the ruins. But Simran, acting on instinct, grabbed a sharp stone from the ground and slashed her palm, letting her blood drip onto the altar. The spirit recoiled, hissing in anger, as the blood seeped into the cracks of the stone. "You will not take him," Simran shouted, her voice trembling with determination. "We may not be descendants, but we will end this." The spirit screamed in fury as the blood soaked into the altar, weakening its hold on the land. With one final, desperate scream, the spirit dissolved into the air, leaving behind nothing but silence. Karan gasped, his chest heaving as he struggled to stand. Simran rushed to his side, helping him to his feet. "It's over," she whispered, though her voice was filled with uncertainty. "It has to be over." But as they left the ruins and made their way back to the village, Karan couldn't shake the feeling that the spirit's warning still lingered. The land had been bound for centuries, and though they had stopped the spirit for now, the curse was far from gone. Somewhere, deep within the earth, the ancient power still waited, waiting for the next soul to awaken it. And Karan knew, in his heart, that this was only the beginning. As Karan and Simran made their way back from the ruins, the weight of what they had experienced pressed heavily on them. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, as though the land itself was alive and watching. Though they had driven the spirit away for now, neither of them could shake the feeling that something far darker had been set in motion. The village of Haripur was quiet as they returned, but it wasn't a peaceful quiet, it was the silence before a storm. The sun was setting by the time they reached Simran's cottage, the sky burning a deep red that only added to their unease. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faintest hint of whispers, voices that seemed to come from the earth itself. Simran lit a lantern as they sat in her small kitchen, trying to make sense of everything they had uncovered. "There's something we're missing," Karan said, his voice low, as though afraid the shadows might hear him. "The spirit warned us, it said we awakened the curse. We thought we were ending it, but what if we've only made things worse?" Simran nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edges of the photograph of Maya that Karan had brought earlier. The image still unsettled her, Maya, staring back from the depths of the forest, as if she had never truly left. "The spirit we saw was ancient, older than anything we've ever encountered. It was bound to the land, and the ritual we performed only weakened it temporarily. We're not dealing with just a ghost, Karan. This is something far older, something rooted in the very soil beneath us." Karan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. If the land is cursed, and the spirits are bound to it, then what's keeping them here? Why hasn't the curse consumed everything by now? Simran pulled out an old map of the area, one that she had been using for her research. "Look here," she said, pointing to a series of ancient burial mounds that dotted the landscape. "These mounds are scattered across the region, and they all lead back to one central point, Rudra Villa. The curse isn't just tied to the villa itself, it's spread across the land, connected by these ancient burial sites." Karan stared at the map, the lines between the mounds forming a twisted pattern. It's like a web, he said softly. The villa is at the center, but the curse radiates outward, through the burial sites. If we could somehow sever the connection. Simran's eyes widened as the realization hit her. The curse feeds on the spirits of those who died here. Their souls are trapped within the land, bound to these burial mounds. But if we can find the source of the curse, the place where the first ritual was performed, we might be able to break the cycle. Their conversation was interrupted by a loud knock at the door. Simran froze, her heart racing. The knock came again, louder this time, as though whoever, or whatever, was outside was growing impatient. Karan stood up cautiously, motioning for Simran to stay behind. He approached the door slowly, his hand trembling as he reached for the handle. When he opened it, there was no one there, only the empty, darkened village street. But something was left behind. On the doorstep, lying atop a pile of dried leaves, was an old, weathered book. Its cover was cracked and faded, the pages yellowed with age. Karan picked it up, his fingers brushing against the brittle leather. The moment he touched it, a strange sensation washed over him, as though the book held secrets too terrible to be known. Simran gasped as she saw the book. "That's impossible," she whispered. "That book. It's been missing for centuries." Karan turned the book over in his hands, the title barely legible in the flickering lantern light. The Tome of the Forgotten. This book, Simran explained, her voice shaking, was said to contain the original ritual that bound the spirits to the land. It was lost after the tribe vanished, believed to have been destroyed. But if it's here now... Karan's heart pounded in his chest. Then someone, or something, wants us to find it. The air in the room seemed to grow colder as they opened the tome. The pages were filled with ancient symbols and illustrations, figures in dark robes, chanting in the moonlight, their faces obscured. The text was written in a language neither of them could fully decipher, but certain phrases stood out, words that seemed to pulse with dark energy: the eternal binding, blood of the ancients, the heart of the land. One particular passage caught Simran's eye. "Look here," she said, pointing to an illustration of a massive tree, its roots extending deep into the earth, wrapping around the burial mounds. "This tree, it's the source. The ritual was performed at its base, and its roots spread across the land, binding the spirits to the mounds. If we can find this tree, we can destroy the curse," Karan finished, his voice filled with a mix of hope and dread. But as they studied the book further, the whispers in the air grew louder, more insistent. Shadows danced along the walls, and the flickering lantern light cast strange, distorted shapes across the room. It felt as though the very house was watching them, waiting for them to make their move. Simran's hands trembled as she closed the book. "We need to leave," she said urgently. "We have to find the tree before it's too late. The curse is waking up, Karan. And if we don't stop it soon, it will consume everything." Karan didn't need to be told twice. They gathered their belongings, and with the book in hand, they set out into the night, guided only by the faint light of the moon and the growing sense of dread that filled the air. The journey into the heart of the forest was long and treacherous. The deeper they went, the darker and more oppressive the atmosphere became. The trees seemed to close in around them, their twisted branches like skeletal hands reaching for them. The ground beneath their feet was soft, almost like it was breathing, pulsing with the ancient power of the curse. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a massive, gnarled tree, its roots extending deep into the earth, wrapping around the burial mounds like the tendrils of a great beast. The tree's bark was blackened and twisted, and the air around it was thick with an unnatural energy. "This is it," Simran whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the wind. The source of the curse. Karan felt a wave of fear wash over him as he approached the tree. He could feel the ancient power radiating from it, the weight of centuries of suffering and death. The ground beneath the tree was littered with bones, the remnants of those who had been sacrificed to fuel the curse. "We have to destroy it," Karan said, his voice trembling. "But how?" Simran opened the tome again, her eyes scanning the pages. "The ritual, the original ritual, can be reversed. But it requires a sacrifice." Karan's blood ran cold. "What kind of sacrifice?" Simran looked up at him, her eyes filled with sorrow. "A life. The life of someone tied to the land. Only by offering their blood can the curse be broken." Karan felt his heart sink. The realization hit him like a hammer. He was the sacrifice. The spirits had chosen him from the moment he stepped foot in Rudra Villa. The curse had been waiting for someone like him, someone with a connection to the land, even if he didn't fully understand it, but there was no time to hesitate. The ground beneath the tree began to tremble, the roots shifting and writhing as though the land itself was awakening. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, and the shadows around them began to move, taking shape. "Karan, we have to do this now," Simran shouted over the rising wind. "If we don't, the curse will consume everything." Karan nodded, his mind racing. He had no choice. The curse had to end, no matter the cost. With trembling hands, he took the ritual dagger from Simran and approached the tree. The wind howled around him, and the ground shook violently, but he kept moving forward. As he stood at the base of the tree, he could feel the weight of centuries of suffering pressing down on him. With a deep breath, he raised the dagger and plunged it into the ground at the base of the tree, his blood mingling with the earth. A blinding light erupted from the tree, and for a moment, everything went silent. Then, with a deafening roar, the tree began to collapse, its roots withering and turning to dust. The ground beneath it split open, and the spirits trapped within the land were released, their anguished cries filling the air as they were finally free. As the light faded and the wind died down, Karan collapsed to the ground, his body weak and trembling. Simran rushed to his side, helping him to his feet. "It's over," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "The curse is broken." But as Karan looked back at the ruins of the tree, he couldn't help but wonder, at what cost? The land was free, but its scars would remain forever. And somewhere, deep within the earth, the ancient power still lingered, waiting. The destruction of the great tree marked a pivotal moment in the history of Haripur. Karan and Simran stood in the clearing, surrounded by the remnants of the curse that had bound the land for centuries. The air felt lighter, the whispers that had haunted them now replaced by an eerie silence. But the silence brought with it a heavy burden of grief. Karan had sacrificed a part of himself to free the spirits, and even though the curse had been lifted, he felt a profound emptiness deep within him. "Are you okay?" Simran asked, concern etched across her face as she helped him rise. "We did it, we ended it." Karan took a moment to catch his breath, still feeling the echo of the ancient power coursing through him. I think so, but it feels like something is missing." He looked around the clearing, noticing the absence of the great tree that had loomed over them just moments before. "We've freed the spirits, but what about us? What if the land still holds onto its memories?" Simran nodded thoughtfully. "We have to return to the village and let the people know. The curse may be gone, but they need to understand what has happened. They need to know that the darkness is no longer a part of their lives." They made their way back through the forest, the path now illuminated by the soft glow of the moonlight filtering through the trees. Each step felt heavy, as if the ground beneath them was mourning the loss of the great tree that had stood for centuries. Karan and Simran shared a silence filled with unsaid words, the weight of their experiences hanging between them. When they finally reached the village, the streets were eerily quiet. It was as if the entire village was holding its breath, waiting for something. As they approached Simran's cottage, she turned to Karan, her eyes filled with determination. "We need to gather everyone. They need to know they are free." Karan nodded, and together they walked to the village square. The few villagers who were still awake looked up, their faces a mix of confusion and fear. Simran raised her hands to quiet the murmurs. "Please, everyone, we have something important to tell you." The villagers gathered around, their expressions wary. Karan took a deep breath, recalling the fear and darkness that had surrounded them for so long. "The curse that has haunted our land is broken. We've freed the spirits that were trapped, and the darkness that has plagued us for generations is gone." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd. An old woman stepped forward, her eyes glistening with tears. "But what of the great tree? It was our protector, our guardian." Karan felt a pang of guilt but pressed on. The tree was both a protector and a prison. It bound the spirits to the land, trapping them in an endless cycle of pain. "We had to destroy it to free them. The land is healing now, but it will take time." Another villager, a young man with a defiant stance, shouted, "How can we trust you? You brought this curse upon us." Simran stepped forward, her voice firm. "We did not bring the curse upon you, we inherited it, but we took action. The ancient power of the land was strong, and it wanted to be freed. Karan sacrificed his blood to lift the curse, to break the chains that bound the spirits to this land. It's time for us to heal together." As the villagers processed their words, the old woman spoke again, her voice trembling. "You think it's over, but the land remembers. It remembers the pain, the suffering. It doesn't forget easily." Karen's heart sank at her words. "We know. We felt it, but now we have a chance to heal, to honor those spirits and learn from our past. We can rebuild, and we can create a future where this darkness cannot return." Slowly, the tension in the crowd began to dissipate. The villagers exchanged uncertain glances, their expressions shifting from suspicion to cautious hope. One by one, they began to murmur among themselves, voices growing louder as they discussed their experiences. As Karan and Simran stepped back, the atmosphere shifted from fear to unity. The villagers started sharing stories of their own encounters with the spirits, their fears, and the losses they had endured over the years. The weight of their collective trauma began to lift as they found solace in shared experiences. Days turned into weeks, and as the sun rose over Haripur, the villagers began to rebuild their lives. They gathered at the site of the great tree, now a clearing filled with sunlight. Together, they planted saplings in its place, creating a new symbol of life and hope. The villagers worked together, healing their wounds and forging stronger bonds with one another. But in the depths of the forest, Karan and Simran felt a lingering unease. They knew that the land still held echoes of the past, memories that would take time to fade. At night, as they slept, they could hear the whispers of the spirits in the wind, reminding them of the darkness that had once reigned. One evening, as they sat by the riverbank, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Simran spoke up, her voice thoughtful. "Do you think we truly ended the curse? Or is it merely lying dormant, waiting for the right moment to rise again?" Karan frowned, staring into the water's reflective surface. "I want to believe we've ended it, but the power of the land is ancient. It has a way of clinging to its history." Simran turned to him, her eyes serious. "What if we need to find a way to honor those spirits? To help them move on completely?" Karan considered her words. "Maybe we could create a place for them, something like a memorial. We could invite the villagers to share their stories and keep their memories alive. It might help the spirits find peace and allow the land to heal." Simran smiled at the idea. "I think that's a beautiful thought. It could be a way for the villagers to connect with the past, to acknowledge the pain, and to honor those who suffered." As they made their plans, a sudden chill swept through the air, and Karan felt a prickling sensation at the back of his neck. It was as if something, or someone, was watching them from the shadows of the trees. He glanced over his shoulder, but the forest remained still. "Did you feel that?" Karan asked, his voice low. Simran nodded, her expression concerned. Yes. It's as if the forest is alive, still holding on to its secrets. That night, Karan was unable to sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as the moonlight spilled into the room. The whispers returned, swirling around him like a haunting melody. It was then he realized that the spirits had not fully departed. They were still here, lingering on the edge of the world, waiting for something. The following days were filled with preparations for the memorial, and the village came together in a way they hadn't for years. They shared stories of loss, of grief, and of hope, each tale weaving a tapestry of their shared history. Karan felt a warmth in his heart as he watched the villagers connect, as they began to acknowledge their pain rather than hide from it. But as the days passed, Karan noticed strange occurrences, objects shifting in his home, shadows flitting just beyond the corner of his vision. At night, he would wake to the sound of soft whispers calling his name, urging him to listen, to remember. One evening, as he and Simran were finalizing plans for the memorial, Karan received a message from a villager named Aditi. She was an elder, known for her deep connection to the land and its spirits. She asked to meet with them urgently. Curiosity piqued, Karan and Simran met with Aditi at her home, an old cottage on the edge of the village. Aditi welcomed them with a warm smile, but Karan could see the worry etched on her face. "I've been sensing a disturbance," Aditi said, her voice low. "The spirits are restless. They are not at peace, and I fear the balance has not been restored." Karan's stomach twisted. "But we freed them. We broke the curse." Aditi shook her head. "You freed the spirits, yes. But you didn't address the root of the problem. The curse was a binding, a chain that held them to this land. Now that they are free, they have nowhere to go, and that can lead to chaos." Simran frowned, processing Aditi's words. "What do we need to do? We must honor their memories, but we must also create a space for them to rest. The memorial is a good start, but we need to invite them to share their stories with us. Only then can they find peace." Karan and Simran exchanged glances, a new determination sparking between them. "We'll do it," Karan said. "We'll create a place where the spirits can feel safe, where they can tell their stories. We'll invite everyone to come and listen." As they left Aditi's cottage, Karan felt the weight of the task ahead. The villagers were ready to remember, to honor those they had lost, but the deeper question loomed in his mind: would it truly be enough? The day of the memorial arrived, bright and hopeful. The village square was adorned with flowers and lanterns, a symbol of life and remembrance. Karan and Simran welcomed everyone as they gathered, creating a circle where stories could be shared and spirits could be honored. One by one, the villagers stepped forward, their voices trembling with emotion as they shared stories of the past, tales of their ancestors, lost loved ones, and the strange encounters they had endured over the years. It was a cathartic experience, an unburdening of grief and fear that had long haunted their hearts. Karan watched as their words wove together like threads, forming a tapestry of shared history. But beneath the surface, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Something darker, more insidious, was lurking just out of sight. As the final villager finished speaking, an uneasy silence fell over the square. The air seemed to thicken with tension, and the villagers looked around nervously, as if expecting something to happen. Karan and Simran exchanged glances, both sensing the same shift in the atmosphere. Suddenly, the wind picked up, swirling through the square with a force that sent the lanterns flickering wildly. The temperature dropped sharply, and a deep, resonant hum seemed to emanate from the earth itself. Karan's heart pounded in his chest as he realized what was happening. The spirits weren't finished. A loud crack echoed through the square as the ground split open near the center, revealing a dark, gaping fissure. The villagers gasped in fear, stepping back from the widening chasm as a cold, unnatural fog began to seep out. Karan rushed forward, instinctively placing himself between the villagers and the growing rift. From the fog, shapes began to form, shadowy figures, their faces obscured, their bodies twisted and distorted. They moved slowly at first, their movements deliberate, as if they were searching for something. Karan's heart raced as he realized these were the spirits they had set free. But something was wrong. They were still trapped. They're lost, Simran whispered, her voice trembling. They don't know where to go. Karan felt a surge of panic. We freed them from the curse, but we didn't guide them. They're stuck between worlds, caught in the limbo of this land. The spirits drew closer, their presence growing stronger. Their whispers filled the air, a cacophony of voices that seemed to pull at Karan's mind, urging him to listen. He could feel their anguish, their pain, and it was overwhelming. What do we do? One of the villagers cried out, fear evident in her voice. Karan looked to Simran, who had already opened the tome they had recovered earlier. Her fingers flipped through the pages frantically, searching for an answer. There must be something, some way to help them cross over, she muttered. Finally, Simran's eyes lit up as she found what she was looking for. Here, the ritual of passage. It's a ceremony that helps spirits find their way to the afterlife, to finally let go of the ties that bind them here. Karan nodded, his heart pounding with both fear and hope. We have to perform it now, before they become too restless. Simran read the instructions aloud, her voice steady despite the growing unease in the square. The ritual required a symbolic offering, something that represented the connection between the living and the dead. Each villager was asked to contribute an item, something personal, something with deep meaning, to honor the spirits and guide them on their journey. The villagers, still shaken but determined, began to offer their tokens, a locket, a handwritten letter, a family heirloom. Each item was placed in the center of the square, forming a small altar surrounded by the glowing lanterns. The spirits hovered at the edges of the square, watching with an intensity that sent chills down Karan's spine. As Simran began to chant the words of the ritual, the atmosphere shifted again. The wind stilled, and the fog seemed to pull back slightly, as though the spirits were listening. Karan stepped forward, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He held out his hand, offering a small pendant that had belonged to his mother, a token of his own connection to the land and those who had come before him. As he placed the pendant on the altar, the ground beneath him seemed to hum with energy. The spirits drew closer, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. Karan could feel them reaching out to him, their presence brushing against his consciousness. They were waiting. With a deep breath, Karan began to speak, addressing the spirits directly. We freed you from the curse, but we didn't understand your pain. You've been trapped here for centuries, bound to the land by forces beyond your control. But now, we offer you peace. We offer you a way home. The spirits hovered in place, their movements slow and deliberate, as if considering his words. The fog around them began to thin, revealing more of their forms, once human, now distorted by the centuries of suffering they had endured. Karan could see their faces, twisted in anguish, and it broke his heart. Simran's chant grew louder, filling the square with a resonant power. The villagers joined in, their voices rising in unison, creating a harmonic vibration that seemed to reverberate through the ground. The spirits responded, their forms flickering as though they were being pulled toward the altar. Suddenly, one of the spirits, a tall figure with long, flowing hair and piercing eyes, stepped forward. She was different from the others, more solid, more defined. Karan recognized her immediately, Maya, the woman whose photograph had led him and Simran to the heart of the curse. Maya's eyes locked onto Karan's, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. He could feel her presence more strongly than ever before, the weight of her sadness, her anger, her longing for release. I know you, Maya whispered, her voice echoing in Karen's mind. "You carry the blood of this land. You are the key." Karen swallowed hard, his pulse racing. "What do you mean?" Maya's form flickered, growing fainter. "The ritual is not enough. You must go deeper. There is one more secret, a truth buried beneath the roots of this land. Only when it is uncovered will we be free." Before Karen could respond, Maya's figure dissolved into the fog, and the other spirits followed. The air around them shimmered as the ritual neared its conclusion, and slowly, one by one, the spirits began to fade, their forms disappearing into the ether. The fog lifted, and the rift in the ground sealed itself, leaving the square quiet and still. But Karen couldn't shake Maya's final words. There was more, a secret deeper than the curse, buried beneath the very roots of the land. As the villagers began to disperse, relieved and hopeful that the spirits had found peace, Karen turned to Simran. "Did you hear what Maya said?" Simran nodded, her expression grim. "There's something else. Something we missed." Karen's mind raced as he pieced together the fragments of what they had uncovered. The curse, the spirits, the land itself, it was all connected. But if there was another secret, something even more ancient, what could it be? "We need to go back," Karen said, his voice filled with resolve. "Back to the villa. Back to where this all started." Simran hesitated for a moment but then nodded in agreement. "We've come this far. We can't stop now." Together, they set out once again, leaving the village behind as they made their way toward Rudra Villa, the place where the curse had first taken root. The journey felt different this time, heavier, as though the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for them to uncover its final secret. As they approached the villa, the air grew colder, and the shadows lengthened. The once grand estate loomed before them, its walls cracked and crumbling, but there was something more, an energy, a pulsing, throbbing force that seemed to emanate from deep beneath the earth. Karan and Simran stepped inside, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The villa felt more alive than ever, as though it was waiting for them to uncover its hidden truth. They descended into the cellar, where the stone floor was damp and cold. At the far end of the room, a small door led to a passageway that hadn't been explored before. Simran held up the lantern, casting long shadows on the walls, as they stepped into the dark corridor. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the sound of their footsteps was muffled by the soft dirt beneath them. Karen's heart pounded as they moved deeper into the passage, the walls closing in around them. They finally reached a dead end, where an ancient, crumbling stone altar stood against the far wall. "This is it," Simran whispered. "This is the heart of the land." Karan stepped forward, placing his hand on the cold stone. The moment he touched it, a surge of energy shot through him, and a vision flooded his mind. The original ritual, the one that had bound the spirits to the land. But there was more, a figure, cloaked in darkness, performing the ritual with a twisted smile. Karan staggered back, clutching his head as the vision engulfed him. He could see the figure, a man with deep-set eyes and a sinister grin, standing at the altar much like the one before him. The air was thick with dark energy, and Karan felt the weight of centuries of anguish pressing down on him. "Who is he?" Karan gasped, looking at Simran, whose face mirrored his shock. "I don't know," she replied breathlessly. "But he looks like he was the one who created the curse." As Karan concentrated on the vision, it unfolded further. He saw the cloaked figure, surrounded by villagers who seemed entranced, caught in a trance of fear and reverence. The man raised his arms, chanting an incantation that echoed through time, binding the spirits to the land, their cries of anguish transforming into a cacophony of despair. Suddenly, the vision shifted. Karan saw the figure standing alone in the forest, his silhouette dark against the vibrant glow of the great tree. The man's expression twisted with rage and betrayal as he reached out to the tree, a fierce storm brewing around him. The tree pulsed, its roots reaching deep into the earth, intertwining with the spirit's essence. The realization hit Karan like a thunderclap. The man was not just a sorcerer but a guardian turned tyrant, someone who had betrayed his own people. He had sought power and control, imprisoning the spirits to harness their energy, trapping them in a cycle of suffering. The tree was his anchor, Karan muttered, piecing the story together. He needed the tree to maintain his control over the spirits. Simran's brow furrowed in thought. But why would he do that? What did he gain? Power, dominance over the village, and perhaps immortality. Karan looked at the altar again, the stone bearing markings of the ancient ritual. We have to break this cycle. We need to destroy whatever binds the spirits to this place and stop the influence of that dark force once and for all. The vision shifted again, and Karan saw the spirits, writhing in anguish beneath the tree's roots. They were not merely trapped, they were intertwined with the very essence of the land. In the depths of despair, Karan felt their longing for freedom. The pain, the heartache, it all flowed through him like a raging river. We can't just destroy the altar, Simran said, her voice filled with urgency. We need to find a way to release the spirits without causing more harm. We have to honor their pain while also giving them the peace they deserve. Karan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. You're right, we can't repeat the mistakes of the past. We must perform the ritual of redemption, a counter-ritual to free them from the bindings of this dark sorcerer. They both knelt at the altar, searching for remnants of the original incantation inscribed on the stones. With Simran holding the lantern, Karan traced the ancient symbols with his fingers, feeling the energy pulsing beneath the surface. As they deciphered the markings, the weight of the darkness pressed in on them, the shadows growing thicker around the altar. Karan could hear whispers echoing through the cellar, the spirits calling to him, urging him to act. What if we're not strong enough? Simran said, worry etched on her face. What if we can't break the binding? We have to believe we can, Karan replied, steeling himself. The villagers are counting on us, and so are the spirits. We can't let fear hold us back. They stood together, the gravity of their task settling in. Karan placed his hand on the altar, feeling its energy surge through him. With a deep breath, he began to chant, reciting the counter-incantation they had pieced together from the markings. As his voice echoed through the cellar, the shadows pulsed and writhed, swirling around them like a dark storm. Simran joined him, her voice harmonizing with his, and together they created a powerful resonance that vibrated through the very foundations of the villa. The air crackled with energy, and the altar began to glow, illuminating the dark space around them. The spirits responded, their figures materializing from the shadows, swirling in a chaotic dance of anguish and hope. Let them go, Karan cried, pouring his heart into the chant. You are free. You are not bound to this place anymore. The spirits began to rise, their forms becoming more defined as they ascended toward the altar. Karan could feel the weight of their pain, their sorrow, and their longing for release flooding his senses. He closed his eyes, focusing on their energy, feeling the chains of darkness begin to crack and shatter. Suddenly, a powerful force slammed into him, knocking him back against the wall. The dark figure from his vision materialized before him, a twisted, shadowy form that flickered like a flame. You dare to defy me? The figure hissed, its voice a chilling echo. You are a fool to think you can release them. They are mine. Karan struggled to his feet, anger coursing through him. You don't own them. They deserve to be free, to find peace. Simran stepped beside him, her gaze unwavering. We won't let you trap them any longer. Your time is over. The shadowy figure let out a roar of rage, the walls of the cellar trembling at its fury. The spirits surged around them, their whispers rising to a crescendo as they fought against the dark force, pulling at its tendrils, tearing at its grip. Karan felt the surge of energy building within him, the spirits gathering strength from his conviction. "Join us," he shouted to the spirits. "Let us break the chains together." The collective will of the spirits surged forward, crashing against the dark figure like a tidal wave. Karan and Simran continued their chant, their voices intertwining with the cries of the spirits. The power of their combined energy pulsed through the altar, lighting it up like a beacon in the darkness. As the shadows writhed and twisted, the figure let out a final, desperate scream. "No, you cannot take them from me." In that moment, Karan pushed all his energy into the altar, unleashing the full force of the ritual of redemption. The altar erupted in a brilliant light, enveloping the entire cellar. The dark figure was consumed, its form disintegrating into wisps of shadow that faded into the ether. As the light pulsed, the spirits lifted from the ground, their forms brightening, their anguish replaced by relief and gratitude. They swirled around Karan and Simran, their whispers transforming into a chorus of joy. Thank you for freeing us," they cried, their voices echoing in harmony. Karan felt a rush of warmth wash over him, and in that moment, he knew they had succeeded. The bonds that had held the spirits captive for centuries were shattered, and they were finally free to move on. One by one, the spirits began to fade into the light, their forms dissolving into radiant energy as they departed the earthly realm. Karan watched in awe, tears streaming down his face as he realized the magnitude of what they had achieved. But amidst the joy, a lingering thought nagged at him. The figure, who had he been? What would happen now that the curse was lifted? As the last spirit faded into the light, a sudden stillness fell over the cellar. Karan and Simran stood there, panting, their hearts racing with the thrill of victory but also with uncertainty. The altar was silent now, its energy subsiding, leaving only the echoes of their chant in the air. "What do we do now?" Simran asked, glancing around the dimly lit cellar. "Is it really over?" Karan took a deep breath, a sense of calm washing over him. "It's over for them, but we still have work to do. We need to ensure the village understands what happened here, to remember the sacrifices made and the spirits freed. We need to honor their memory." As they ascended from the cellar, the sunlight poured in through the broken windows of the villa. The once dark corridors now felt alive, filled with the warmth of new beginnings. They stepped outside into the embrace of daylight, feeling the weight of the past lift from their shoulders. When they returned to the village, Karan and Simran shared the story of their journey, how they had broken the curse, freed the spirits, and defeated the dark sorcerer. The villagers listened with rapt attention, their faces filled with a mixture of relief, joy, and sorrow. In the days that followed, they built a memorial at the site of the great tree, a place where stories could be shared, where the memories of those who had suffered could be honored. They planted flowers, laid stones, and created a beautiful garden that symbolized rebirth and hope. As they worked, Karan felt a sense of purpose and connection to the land, a deep understanding that healing would take time, but they were no longer alone in their struggles. Together, they could face whatever lay ahead. But the questions remained. What had become of the dark figure? Was he truly gone, or had he merely retreated, waiting for another opportunity to rise again? Karan couldn't shake the feeling that their battle was not over. The land was healing, yes, but there was still a darkness lurking in the corners of their world, a shadow that they had yet to fully confront. Days turned into weeks,